Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, I'm at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville, Tennessee, with a couple of stars here with me, Jim Gilmore and Linda Chambers. We're going to do an amazing show about a vintage audio console, and we're going to get a tour from Linda of a mobile recording studio. It's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to this famous audio console behind me here. Wow, we're going to tell you all about that. With me here is my guest, Jim Gilmore. Hi, Jim. Good to see you.
Hi, Kirk. Nice to see you. It's always a pleasure.
I got to tell you something. I'm
I
embarrassed.
only call you when there's problems.
That's right. There was a short time when you'd call me and there was a problem.
Yes, there have been several of those.
Yeah, that's right. That was 15 years ago with an Axia
Is it
system.
that long?
Yeah.
That's when I was first getting into IP audio.
You don't look any older now than you did then. It's because you looked old then, or you just haven't grown up?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. For those of you who don't, I'm Kirk Hardak, host of This Week in Radio Tech. Chris Tarr is probably not going to be with us today. We got a busy show right here today, so hopefully Chris can be with us next week. Jim Gilmore is my guest, and in Nashville engineering circles, Jim needs no introduction. Everybody knows Jim Gilmore. But for those of our audience who are not in Nashville, tell us a little bit about Jim Gilmore.
I don't know where to start. I've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I started out in radio in 1963 when I was in high school.
All right.
And gradually kind of morphed into the recording industry, and then they merged a little bit for me, and then got into television, and here I am many years later.
Well, we won't go through the individual highlights just yet. That'll be part of some of the story. But basically, if you're a broadcast engineer in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, and people hear about your talent, you're going to end up in a recording studio at some point, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And back years ago, the radio stations in a smaller town where I grew up became the recording studio too. If people wanted to record something, they came to the radio
That
station.
reminds me of the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. We just didn't have that microphone hanging from the ceiling on the springs. But it wasn't far divorced from that.
Yes. Oh, wow. And through your career, you've also worked for a rather large company that probably all of our viewers are familiar with, and that would be Harris.
Harris Corporation, Gates Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Those were some great times, and I had some wonderful mentors. The two who come to mind quickly are Wally Cabrick and George Stevenson. Wally was the guy who designed the stay level, the level devil, the SA-39, the Gates dual limiter. He did all that tube design. He was a genius, and by the time I got there, Wally had been kind of pushed aside because everything was going to ICs and South State. And Wally was my supervisor, and he was kind of back away from things. So I used to go talk to Wally a lot, and he loved to tell you stories and teach you about tube audio. That's where I really learned a lot about vacuum tube audio. We would go to the Plaza. You ever go to the Plaza in Quincy, Illinois?
No.
It was a nice restaurant, but they had a great bar. And after work, Wally used to go to the Plaza and drink martini. So you went to the Plaza with Wally, had martinis,
Uh-huh.
and learned more than you could ever hope to learn in college.
Yeah. Wow.
And George was an amazing guy. He designed all the early automation stuff, automatic tape control. He was the chief engineer at WCFL in Chicago.
Okay.
Built the studios where they did Chicken Man and the
Oh
Tooth
my
Fairy.
goodness. Yeah.
He was good friends with all those guys. And
Wow.
George was amazing.
Now that career with Harris took you to a number of places around the world, right?
It did. Real garden spots. Lagos, Nigeria
Oh,
was
okay.
one of them. Shogunlei, but there were some great places. Like I had a wonderful time in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Oh.
We were all over, but all over the United States and out. We had in England. We allied with a company over there, Dynamic Technologies, and we were swapped out to England many times, and so I worked over there. Just great story, wonderful.
We've got a packed show because there's more to Jim Gilmore's career that's really interesting. I think one of the first times I met Jim, he showed me this, I think it's $250,000 audio console that he was rebuilding. I don't know if this is over at CMT or
That
just
was
where.
probably one of the SSL.
Yeah.
Maybe the 8,000. Yeah. But it was a big rebuild.
It just floored me how big this console was. And Jim, he just knows it like the back of his hand. Well, and we're,
Sometimes.
I should tell you where we're coming to you from because, excuse me, today's show is going to be largely about this audio console, which has an amazing history of its own. And we're also going to take you on a tour through a mobile recording studio that so many artists that you know have recorded in this mobile studio. And we're going to take you through it a little bit later on in the show with Linda Campbell. We are at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where this studio is that we're in right now. And we just got a tour a little while ago of part of the museum. That's just amazing. So that's coming up. We're going to be right back after this word from our new sponsor, Air, makers of Playout One. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of Air. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with Air.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month. All you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through Air?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming. And from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started. Thanks a lot to Air for their sponsorship of This Week in Radio Tech. I'm a user of their Playout One systems, and I've got to check out some of the things that Ricky Lee just mentioned and that we're going to find out about in future weeks. I'm Kirk Harnack. It's This Week in Radio Tech, episode 734, and I'm at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum, which is here in Nashville, Tennessee. Jim Gilmore is my guest. Jim, we're going to take a look at this console in a minute, but you've got a little bit more history to talk about. Things like WSM and another museum you've built a studio in.
We did a project similar to this one, a museum in Bristol, Tennessee, called the Birthplace of Country Music. Okay. And it started out as a project. They had this old console, and we're going to make a display out of it. And of course, it morphed into, well, let's make it work. And so this was a Raytheon console. You may be old enough to remember.
It's probably big for what it does.
It is. Yeah. It is. But it came from one of the original stations in Bristol where Tennessee Ernie Ford was.
Oh.
And anyway, it was a rusted hulk when I got it. And over a period of almost 2 years, we made it into a really nice console. but they wanted it to look vintage, but they wanted it state of the art. So it's like a 1932 Ford with a 409 Chevy big block engine in it. Yeah. But they had to be able to record live Pro Tools through the system, but they didn't want to look like it. So it was a challenge, but it ended up looking very vintage, and it's still working to this day. I haven't had any calls on it since I put it in. So it was built like a brick house.
You invited me to come see it a few times, and
you did.
Well, in Bristol, Tennessee, it's like a 7 or 8 hour drive from Nashville, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, it's about 6.
Okay.
But it's all interstate. It's worth going to see.
I should go see that place, birthplace of country music, and go see Kentronic. Go see Tom King up there.
That's right. Tom King actually worked on the project because they, in addition to having a control room where they could record and display and stuff, they wanted a low power FM.
Oh.
And Tom worked with us on that. Oh. Nice guy.
Well, you're known around Nashville for being able to resurrect old equipment to make it work like new again. And so we're going to watch a short video in just a moment. But first, tell me about the room that we're in now. Of course, we're in the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville. That's different now than the Country Music Hall of Fame. That's different than the Songwriters Hall of Fame. This is the musicians. So it's specially designed to pay tribute to the musicians in music. It doesn't matter if it's country.
And the engineer.
And yeah, that's right.
Don't forget that.
There's a great deal of multi-track tape machines in here. There's all kinds of audio consoles in this museum.
Very historic consoles. The original console from the Quonset Hut is on display. Yeah. And it recorded Brenda Lee and Bobby Vinton and Patsy Cline and just on and on and on.
And this trailer that we're going to see, this mobile recording studio, we're going to see in just a little bit. A lot of rock and roll artists have recorded in there, including Jimmy Buffett did some recording in there.
Yes, he did. Yeah. And I think you will probably note some of the things when you play the video that you did earlier, Brenda.
So this room right here we're in is workable studio.
It's a workable studio where radio stations can come and do live broadcasts. Something's going on in the museum they want to talk about, or if they just want to say, hey, we're here at the Country Music Hall of Fame on my mind, because I do stuff over there for them too. Yeah. But you can come here and do a live broadcast. We're here at the Musicians Hall of Fame. We're live. And they can run the same console that used to run 60 years ago.
60 years ago? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was built back then. So,
have you changed the tube since then?
Wish. This console does not have the original electronics for it, because when it was donated to the Country Music Hall of Fame, the electronics, unfortunately, were in 2 big racks, like this one next to it. And they said, well, we don't need them. They threw them in the dump.
Wait, this console originally, the electronics were not all in it. They were external.
No active electronics in this board.
My goodness.
This is all just passive, and everything went to all the amplifiers in the rack.
Wow.
And so they kept the console and threw the racks in the dumpster. And they donated this to the Country Music Hall of Fame, and it sat there for 25 years and ended up over here.
You know, that's a bit like comparing a vision switcher from the 1950s or 60s that a TV station would have, where the panel that the operator, the technical director would use was just a panel of buttons, and all the electronics were back in the rack room. So audio consoles used to be, this one anyway.
Yeah, very much. And we've kind of come full circle with audio over IP. You've got a Surface, and you got one Cat 6 going out to all the intricacies in the rack.
Yeah, wow. Well, tell you what, some friends at the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame, so many Hall of Fames here, Halls of Fame, friends at the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame produced a 2.5-minute video with Jim Gilmore about this console, and they did a great job of putting lots of information in the 2.5 minutes. So Suncast is going to roll that video for you right now.
What you're looking at is a piece of broadcast history that almost didn't survive. It almost went to the dumpster, but it was salvaged. It started life at the WSM transmitter. They were asked to custom build a console to mix the Opry when it was at the Ryman. So in true WSM fashion, they said, what do you want? We'll build it. So they constructed this right down to cutting out every piece of aluminum, wiring everything inside the board, and they built a console for the Opry. The Opry moved from the Ryman to Opryland, and this console was surplused. So they said, wait a minute, we need that to mix a morning radio show at WSM called The Waking Crew. And we have still the original scribble strips up here that show all the instruments and some of the talent that was done with the Waking Crew. When Channel 4 was sold and WSM had to move away from Nob Hill, so the console was once again surplus, and they donated it to the Country Music Hall of Fame. So the console was just a shell, and it had no electronics, and it sat for about 25 years, and I was down there one day, and Alan Stoker said, come look at this board. I called Joe Chambers here at the Musicians Hall of Fame, and I said, Joe, I've got this console, would you like to have it for a display? And he said, no, not a display, it has to work. And I said, but Joe, it has no electronics. And in his fashion, he said, well, it's got to have electronics. So here it is in 2023, a completely refurbished console with state-of-the-art electronics in it, and it is in a room that is fully capable of doing live broadcasts for radio. The room can do podcasts, and if you want to come see the board in person, you can come to the Musicians Hall of Fame. It is an operating exhibit, and you can come in and have a look at it. Maybe someone will be in here working, you can see them work, or maybe there'll be a radio station doing a live broadcast, and you can watch. It'll be just like old times.
And we're back in the studio after that quick video about the console that's behind us. Jim here has located a schematic diagram of the console. I get it, hand drawn with a little help, drawn in 1975. Who drew this schematic?
Gene Wall. Gene was one of the engineers at the studio and at the transmitter side. So his name is Gene.
But the console was built in the early 60s originally, so this is a redraw, right?
Yeah, this is a redraw. They had, when they moved the console from the Ryman to Nob Hill, where WSM was at the time, to do the Waking Crew, it needed some physical changes in order to produce the show the way they wanted to. So they made these changes. It wasn't massive, but they made changes.
Tell you what, let's scoot in a little closer to the console here, and I'll put this down, and I'm going to see if we can. This is going to drive everybody crazy. I'm going to move the camera a little bit here, see if we can unhook it from the wires and get a little closer tour of the console. So, Jim, this console dates from the early '60s, but it operates differently now than it did then. What was it originally designed to do?
It was originally designed to mix the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman, and it had 3 buses, and those 3 buses were combined, think of them submasters, into mono. They usually used 1 bus for all the instruments, and 1 for the vocal, and then 1 for all the peripheral things like commercials and mixing the audience in and stuff like that. And once they had the levels roughly set on these faders assigned to one of the 3 buses, they would just use the 3 subs and do the mix. They were lazy. You know, it's a radio show, so they wanted it to be easy. And you have a lot of acts, and mostly the band is the same for all the acts, the Opry band. And so they know pretty much where everything's going to be, and so they just start there. When we changed this console, Joe Chambers, who was the original, the guy who had the concept of the museum and put it all together, said, when we put this thing in for the stations, they're going to want to be stereo.
Oh,
So it has to be stereo. And I said, no, it was never stereo. He said, well, it has to be. So, okay.
But it was mono, but it had 2 meters on it?
It had 2 meters. One was for the mono mix, and the other was for metering the peripheral things like the foldback and the audience mix and all. It was a utility meter. And this switched the meters to the other bus.
Okay.
So anyway, we ended up, here's how we can do it. So we took one bus for left, one bus for right, red and green, and one bus for aux or Q. So the yellow became Q, green became left, and the excuse me, and the red became right.
Okay.
So there are 3 masters, and they're up in the upper corner: green, red, and yellow. And they became the masters, and then the masters used to be here.
Okay.
So we changed those, and we put 3 announcer mics. So the radio stations could come in and run it like a radio.
You have 3 mics in the room, and so these red ones are for the 3 mics. Yeah. Okay.
And these are the switches to turn them on.
And now, when you converted this to stereo, you mentioned like this fader would be left channel, and this fader would be right channel. So it takes 2 faders.
So it takes 2 faders.
Okay.
Early on in when I was at WSIX FM years ago in 1967, we had an Altec console, and it was a dual channel. So we had 2 pots for each turntable, and you had to get really good with running 2 pots with one hand. Because back then, it was early on, and there weren't any stereo consoles. Gates Radio, my old alma mater, developed a stereo console back in the 60s called Stereo Yard, and they stereoized a yard. But there weren't many stereo consoles out there. So most of the stations use those Altec consoles.
One of the things about this console that, to my eyes, immediately looks very modern and like, well, wait a minute, how can this be from the early 60s and that's these lighted lever switches. And I realized when I started in radio, which would have been in the mid 70s for me, at a public radio station, we had a like a remote mixer that we would go mix our the orchestra concerts at, and that mixer was made by UREI. And it had these same levers that changed colors. Well, how incredibly slick is that? You mean they had these in the early 60s?
They did. I can remember seeing these switches in 1963. If anybody wants some trivia, they are made by Switchcraft, and they were called Lever Light.
Of course.
and there were 3 versions of them.
Yeah.
Lever Light 1, 2, and 3. These are Lever Light 2s.
Okay.
And then they made the 3s, a little bit more modern version.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I mean, this had to look like Jetsons stuff in 1963.
Look at all the funny colored lights. It must be good. It has colored lights.
Oh, wow. So radio stations can come in, they can get the studio and broadcast live from here.
Call Linda Chambers at the Musicians Hall of Fame and say, Linda, I'd like to come broadcast. Can we do that? Yeah, sure.
And by the way, if you stand by in our 3rd block, we're going to meet Linda Chambers. She's going to take us on a tour of that mobile recording studio. So that's coming up. What else can you mention about that? What's the console made of?
The console is made of 1/8-inch thick aluminum.
Okay.
Heliarched and welded. They cut this stuff out with a bandsaw. They cut all these angles and everything in the shop at Concord Road where WSM AM is.
Are you kidding me?
No, it was built in that shop.
Oh my goodness.
Another piece of history.
That's like 5 miles from my house.
Yeah.
This is the WSM transmitter site.
Big famous self-supporting or 2 self-supporting towers back to back.
The Blawnox diamond shaped. Wow. And I have been to the machine shop they have in the basement. And
this was built.
I thought they built transmitters there.
They did. They built the first TV transmitter.
Wow.
The first Channel 4 transmitter was built in that same shop.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. So I'm not sure what else to ask. So This was used at the Grand Ole at the Ryman, right?
At the Ryman, and then it was moved to WSM on Nob Hill Road, and it mixed the Waking Crew. If you look, these are all things from the Waking Crew. Teddy Bart, and you look at, there's it says sax Norm. That was Norm Ray on saxophone. I mean, these are the original scribble scripts that are from that.
This was in the mid-'70s? Yeah. They had live musicians on the Waking Crew?
Totally live orchestra.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you imagine what that was?
In the mid-'70s?
Yeah.
Wow.
The live orchestra stopped in around 82 or 83. Because when they moved out to Opryland, they were still doing the Waking Crew, and they did it from the stage door lounge. And then they moved it to General Jackson. And then
to the boat? The boat? Yeah. They did the show from the boat.
They did. Yeah. It was docked.
Yeah, sure,
but
sure.
Yeah, they did. For a while, they did the Waking Crew from the boat.
And then, was it
but not with this console?
Yeah, okay. Was it owned by Gaylord at that time?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, it was. It was originally owned by National Light. Yeah. And then there was a sale, and American General took over National Light. And American General said, we don't want to be in. And they sold it, and Ed Gaylord bought everything.
Wow.
That was the hit.
We're going to find out a little bit more about the electronics that Jim Gilmore decided to put in this console when he rebuilt it for use right here, because it was empty. It was a shell at that time. So he had also, he had to make it fit. But we're going to find out about that and a lot more coming up. This week in Radio Tech, we are at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum with Jim Gilmore. We're in the radio studio that's available to you if you want to broadcast live from here yourself. I'm Kirk Harnack. It's This Week in Radio Tech, and we'll be right back after this from Broadcast Bionics.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These can be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Big thanks to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, I'm Kirk Harnack along with Jim Gilmore. We're at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. And specifically, we're in the radio studio that they wanted to build to encourage radio stations to come broadcast live from here. And Jim Gilmore rebuilt this room, what, about 2 years ago?
Yeah, it has been about 3 years. Actually, it started even earlier than that because it was all during COVID when I was really working on it. And I guess that was fortunate.
So I asked Jim if he would get a little technical with us as engineers. So he's going to give us a tour and tell us some of the design considerations, what he tried to keep the same from the original design concepts, in the early 60s at the Ryman Auditorium to integrating that with today's necessary modern electronics, keeping things very low noise, and it was a bit challenging, wasn't it?
It was old school because I wanted to retain the original design of mixing bus that it had been built around. And if you're old school, you will recall that a low impedance balanced mixing bus has to have backloading resistors and has to be all calculated with the number of inputs, and the value of the resistors depends on how many inputs you have, what you're mixing, and then when you're actually moving the switches, if you move it off of that bus has to be backloaded so that it keeps the same impedance and does not change the level. So if we had a tone going in one of these and we had a source assigned to it, and we moved that off, if we didn't have those backloading resistors, you'd see the level change, go up. And so you have to keep everything balanced. And to do that, I had to go back and get the books out because I hadn't built a low impedance balanced bus mixer in probably 50 years.
Now, how is that different from modern analog mixing designs?
Modern analog mixing, generally you have a summing amplifier. And you can put as many inputs as you want into that summing amplifier because at the node point, it becomes infinite. And it doesn't make any difference if you switch stuff in and out. So it's a lot easier to build stuff.
Okay.
The old school thing gives you the advantage of a really quiet bus. It's balanced. And, it's just a lot more trouble. And modern consoles, you're switching so much stuff in and out and moving buses around. You just couldn't do that. You've got to have zero impedance.
Okay.
And so we didn't do that. We kept that, and I had to design the amplifiers around that.
Okay, so that's what yes, you designed your replacement electronics around the parts of the console that you wanted to keep intact.
Yes, we kept that aspect of it original. Okay. And for two reasons. First of all, I wanted to kind of keep it as vintage as we could, but secondly, going in and rewiring all these things is a lot of work.
So you showed me the electronics up here.
I can show you some of them here. We can open this up.
I'll hold that.
And
okay,
that's
okay.
Okay. If that bothers it, I didn't do a good job building it. These are all amplifiers that were built for this. In truth, part of them were built. These I designed for the console in Bristol years ago. I already had those designs. I was able to put them. But the other stuff we had to build. There's transformers in it. There's active balance stuff. It's a mix of modern and old. And we can pull this up, but that's
wow.
I don't think we'd be.
We won't see much from that.
Well, maybe we.
See, I'll move the camera up and over to have a look at that.
Strip.
Here we go. Oh my goodness!
Here you can see the busting.
And
you can see all these original terminal blocks were how the audio sources got in and out of this.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge.
Wow. Easy, convenient solder connection.
Yes.
That is beautiful, but what a lot of work. My goodness.
It took a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah.
But the results was good.
Oh my goodness. Okay, can you put that back down? You have the strength? I think that's a little bit heavy.
It's amazingly, if you look at aluminum, they did a lot of work. But back then they had plenty of people. No problem. I don't think you could afford to build it like that these days.
So how people like me, people who are watching the show, I posted a picture of you a couple of years ago after we had a Tennessee Hall of Fame, Radio Hall of Fame meeting here on Facebook, and I got a lot of people appreciating the work here. Aside from,
I thought you were going to say they recognized me for posters in the post office.
Aside from engineers like us, who appreciates this kind of work?
You've raised a really good question. And how long is this technology going to be appreciated, understood? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Maybe by the fact that we're sitting here talking about it, somebody in the future will see that and say, "Oh, yeah, I get it."
I just wonder, I mean, in 50 years, will somebody say, well, we're going to put a vintage Mackie console in there now?
What stuff do we have now that will be worth doing?
Yeah.
It's like if you're going to restore an old car, if you've got a 32 Ford or something, or a neat Corvair, but who's going to restore a Tesla? Who's going to restore a Kia? Or,
Right.
Who's going to care about it?
I think one thing that we all appreciate, even whether it's electronics or something else, is commodity materials, commodity items are not that special to us in our heart. And this is not a commodity item.
No, it's not. I mean, we're in a society and in a business where everything's disposable. How long has it been since you fixed a TV? Have you fixed? Yeah. I actually repaired a power supply in one of my Samsungs, but how many people are going to do it? And if you take it to a TV shop, if they even exist, what are they going to charge you? It's not worth it. Yeah. Nobody does that anymore.
Well, when you can buy literally a 90-inch TV for $1,300, that 20 years ago, when they had something even close to that, it was $16,000-$17,000. But now at Costco you can get an enormous TV. Because we just bought one for our radio station lobby, right?
I just bought one not long ago, and it's a 65-inch, and it's under $1,000. But let's think about consoles.
Yeah.
Let's think about some of the Telos products. They're wonderful consoles, and you can buy them for the right price and everything. Yeah. But will they be restored in the future?
Right.
No, because you'll be able to buy the next generation or something cheaper than you could even think about restoring it.
Exactly. Sure. Now there are other consoles, and we talked earlier in the show about maybe the first time I met you. I swear somebody, maybe it's CMT, maybe it was you, I forget, showed me a big console that was getting restored, and I thought it was you. But this seems to be something that's near and dear to your heart. You seem to understand the complexities and the scale of recording studio consoles that are, longer than your arms are wide. Tell me about your passion for rebuilding these kind of consoles.
Well, I think it's probably twofold. One is they sound wonderful. They sound really good. And the modern digital consoles don't have that warmth and the clarity that some of the older Neves and things like that have. So that's one reason. Another reason is just for the fact of saying, I've got this Neve console, wonderful restored console. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it kind of does, because you have a passion for doing this, because I've seen you involved and you've told me stories about it.
I do, I do want to keep some of the old stuff going. Compressor limiters, mic preamps, and things like that. I do have a passion for it. And people are at the point right now, there's going to be a peak on what the stuff is worth and how people really want it. But right now, it's very desirable because of the sound. You can get a plug-in. Let's say we're doing a Pultec EQP 1A, excuse me, equalizer. It's got a certain sound to it, and you can get the plug-in, but it really doesn't. It's close, but it doesn't sound the same. And how long are people going to really want that?
You mentioned compressors, and before the show, you were showing me some video of an RCA compressor that you were rebuilding. Tell me about these old compressors. And earlier, you also mentioned the Level Devil and the Stay Level.
Yeah, all these are very desirable boxes, and people love the sound of them. So, yeah, I was just rebuilding an RCA BA6. Before that, I think I did a Level Devil, and I think I did another RCA 86. But these were all for clients, and they wanted them redone. This one client of the RCA 86A1 brought this thing to me in a box, and it was a basket. It was rusted. It was just completely. My advice was, don't do it. And yet he said, I want to do it. And I said, it's going to cost you. He said, I don't care. Wow. I'm sure there would have, if I had said it's going to cost you $20,000, he would have said, oh, well, maybe not. But, people want the sound of them.
And how would you describe the sound that you get through one of these classic compressors? And how similar were they? Or were they all different from each other, or just different from what's modern?
Each one had its own characteristic sound. Whether you're doing an opto limiter like the LA2, whether you're doing a vari-mu limiter like the BA6A, or any one of those 6386 cube limiters, they sound very warm and they're very forgiving. If you clip a modern IC preamp, it's just going to lob the top right off of it. If you look at the waveform, the tube thing is just going to gently mush it. It's a sound. People like the sound.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sound and people liking the sound, as I've alluded to, there is an exhibit here that I got to go through about an hour ago with Linda Campbell, right?
Linda Chambers.
Chambers. I'm sorry. It's the fourth time today. Linda Chambers. Linda is the CEO and curator, co-founder, yes, of the Nashville Music School.
With her husband, Joe.
With Joe, yeah.
Who's no longer with us.
Yeah. And so we're going to take a look at that in a couple of minutes. It's This Week in Radio Tech, our 734th episode. Kirk Harnack along with Jim Gilmore in Nashville, Tennessee at the Musicians Hall of Fame. And our show is brought to you in part by Henry Engineering. And Henry Engineering is the maker of this amazing product. I just installed 4 of these in Hawaii. As soon as I think Suncast is going to get it up here on the screen. There it is. It's the back UPS. Now, why am I so darn crazy about this box? Because it makes my job super easy. So, there are some key pieces of equipment in your radio station that have 2 power supplies, and that's great. File servers, other servers typically have 2 power supplies, but there's a lot of gear that doesn't have 2 power supplies. Some of it maybe should, but some of it doesn't. Maybe your EAS gear, maybe the amplifiers or the relay system that pass your EAS gear, your EAS audio, your station audio through that. Maybe you've got an Ethernet switch that you depend on for audio over IP, but it doesn't have 2 power supplies. What do? Well, the back UPS is your answer. Why? Well, the back UPS has 2 AC inputs and 1 AC output. Okay, well, it's a duplex output, but they both give you the same AC. And what it does is it's got a super fast relay switching system inside that normally you would have this connected. You'd be powering your gear through the UPS. Now, I'm talking typically about gear that only has 1 power supply, but you don't want it to ever go off. So normally it's powered through your UPS. But hey, if you're like me, you know that UPSs can absolutely give it up and die. And when they do, oh man, you're out of luck. What are you going to do? They're supposed to bypass, but do they always? Absolutely not. So what this does is it switches over instantly to the commercial power, the non-UPS power. Or you could have it switch over to a different UPS. Now, that's always a possibility. But the point is, your gear doesn't go without power. And when it wants to switch back to the UPS, you can set how long that UPS power is good so it doesn't sit there and rattle back and forth if your UPS is thinking about coming back on, right? You can set that on this box. You can also get status outputs from it to hook to your remote control system. So you can tell remotely, hey, which power is my gear being powered from? The back UPS, I love this box. Again, we just installed 4 of them in our racks in Hawaii on Maui for our 8 radio stations there, and feeling a whole lot better about that. You can get this from Broadcasters General Store. Broadcasters General Store is at bgs.cc. bgs.cc is the website. You can give them a call at 352-622-7700. And they are, good folks. They'll get these things shipped right out to you. Love them. Thanks a lot, BGS. Broadcasters General Store for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. We're live at the Musicians Hall of Fame And hey, I should have warned Suncast, but Suncast, let's cue that video up of the tour of the mobile recording unit. Jim, the name of the fellow who owned this,
Brian Ahern.
Brian Ahern. Now,
he produced many people. And you're going to look at some of the
yeah.
But he did. He was one of the early people that had a purely remote audio truck as opposed to video.
Right.
And it's an amazing truck. You'll get the full tour from Linda, but it's an amazing piece.
We're going to see it, and let's roll it now. Suncast, go ahead. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack here at the Musicians Hall of Fame, and on the TWiRT show, and I'm here with Linda Chambers. Hi, Linda. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for hosting us today. Yeah. We've been having a great time with Jim Gilmore in the radio studio, but you've got something pretty amazing to show us.
Yeah.
What is it?
Here at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum, we honor musicians, of course, but we also honor producers and engineers. And this is what we call an Encatron trailer that Brian Ahern took all over California and then across the states, recording in here. It's one of the first mobile recording studios. And as we walk up, you'll see on the wall here is over 40 #1 albums, platinum and gold albums. So many different people had recorded in here, anywhere from Willie Nelson to
Emmylou Harris.
Emmylou Harris.
Yeah.
Well, Brian Ahern was married to Emmylou Harris at one time. Yes, and so Emmylou and Dolly and
Rodney Crowell.
Rodney Crowell, absolutely, yeah.
Ricky Skaggs, been here. Okay.
Roseanne Cash.
Oh wow.
Leon Russell, Johnny Cash.
Sissy Spacek.
Yeah.
Wow.
George Jones. Some of the Bradley Barnes sessions were done in this trailer.
And how convenient for the artist, the trailer could pull up at their house, right?
We'd pull up to their house, to a bar, to a barn, wherever, they wanted to. And so Brian helped us put this studio back together with mostly original artifacts.
All right.
So,
well, Jackson, our cameraman, is going to gingerly back himself through this as we get the tour. Look at this gear over here, these equipment racks. And oh my goodness, look at this. It's all organized. There's shelving here for drawers for Studer parts and cable ties and AC cords. Oh my goodness, look at this stuff. And then here's the Ampex reel-to-reel machines. Wow. Linda, come on in and tell us what we're looking at here on this. This is a reel-to-reel machine, a 24-track reel-to-reel. Look at that. It's an MCI. And look how big the electronics shelving was down here. Just enormous. Wow. I am told, Linda, that this entire van, not only is it metal outside, but it also has lathing of lead.
Lead lined, yeah. And we actually, this was out in a field behind Brian Ahern's house when we found it. And
by the way, I found out it's not too far from my house.
Oh, yeah?
It's where this thing lived for a while.
Yes, for a long time.
Yeah.
And so when we brought it in, it was an 18-wheeler, and we had to lower the tires so that it would fit underneath the pipes coming in, and then we actually built the room around it. So if we leave here, I'm not sure it's going to leave.
Well, let's continue the tour here. We have some gold records on the wall. What every musician wants, gold records on the wall. Emmylou and more Emmylou, and well, look at all the Emmylou here. That's Brian Ahern's.
Brian Ahern was married to Emmylou, and so she recorded in here a lot, and recorded with Linda Ronstadt and Dolly Parton in here.
So here's the audio console. This particular one is an MCI. I'm told that earlier there was a Neve console in here. And then we have some outboard processing gear. Wow. Just take a look at that. I'm not going to try to tell you everything that's there because, in broadcasting, we use a different set of gear than you typically use in recording.
They enjoyed each other.
But this trailer, this portable music studio. This is really Brian Ahern's doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His dream?
He said that he had a dream about building one.
Uh-huh.
And so he built this, and like I said, he was in California at the time and did a lot of recording in California, but then came to Nashville and recorded all over. Yeah. And then had it at his house. You could even go to his house and record.
These
This
are
is studio.
These are clipped speakers. I noticed that they're actually upside down to get the treble and mid-range firing right at the producer here, the mix engineer, and then the bass is up a little bit higher. But those are the clipped speakers. There's one more room to look at here.
Yeah, and this is where Brian would actually sit in a very comfortable chair right here in this little corner, and he called it his comfort zone. So this is where he would sit and listen. And he actually, inside here, when we peeled back some of the wood, different artists would have signed in there that after they recorded.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And now, so musicians could perform in this little studio, or they could perform in their home or on the beach, wherever they were, and run cables out to them.
Yes.
But they could do either way.
Either
right?
way.
Wow. Wow. And we have guitar. Look at all these Emmylou Harris guitars here, of course, and a Brian Ahern guitar over there. A Hagstrom bass over there. The Fender Vibratone.
Yeah.
This is absolutely
But all these are the
beautiful.
original walls and the floor. We had to clean the walls about a dozen times from it sitting, but yeah.
Wow. Hey, maybe the camera can get a close-up just above your head here, Linda. There. This is what Jackson, our cameraman, showed us earlier. This is the lead, I don't know what you might call it, but it's shielding, lead shielding, that, boy, that'd take care of a microwave oven, that's for sure. So our phones don't work in here. Linda, we're going to wrap this up, but why don't you give, let's step out in the light where there's more light here. And maybe you could give us an invitation if engineers, producers, people interested in music want to see this display. What do they need to do?
Yeah, come on in. We love our visitors, and we have thousands of artifacts representing musicians, but we also have a lot of boards and talk about a lot of studios. We have actually American Sound Studio, the actual walls that came out of there. So there's a lot to see here. So come on down to Musicians Hall of Fame Museum. We're on the first floor of the Municipal Auditorium here in Nashville.
Hey, I want to look at one more thing as we close out here. Look at this enormous picture here. Here we have Brian Ahern, we have Mark Knopfler, and who else is here? Donovan Cowart. This photo was taken during the recording session of the album George Jones, The Bradley Barnes Sessions. This was in 1994 in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. This has seen some action. Oh, you got more to look at?
Here, well, Roseanne inside the trailer there.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Roseanne Cash. Wow. Oh, here's the Jimmy Buffett.
Yep, Jimmy Buffett had recorded in here, and there's people that worked on that.
That's a fun album. You had to be there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Albert Lee.
Albert Lee, yeah.
And Dolly?
And then Dolly.
Did Dolly record in here?
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
We've got to wrap this up. If you want to see more of this, and I've lived in Nashville for 20 years, and I've been in this building once before, but I've never taken the tour. So that's on my list. Going to bring the wife and kids here, and we're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
Linda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
we
being with us.
enjoyed it.
Appreciate
Thank
you very much. I'm Kirk Harnack for This Week in Radio Tech. We are back live, and look who's joined us. Linda Chambers has joined us. Hi, Linda.
Yeah, hi. Back again.
It's good to see you. Thank you for your tour of that trailer. That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you for showing everybody that hasn't seen it. It is amazing, and it's fun, yeah.
So I've got to ask you, when I first heard about this museum, it's this Hall of Fame, it's called the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum. And in the tour with Jim and with you, the brief tour that I took, I was flabbergasted at how much you actually honor producers and engineers and the equipment that they used. So not just the guitars are here. Of course, there's going to be guitars and clothing from the musicians, but the technical gear that was used to record all this. Tell me about this emphasis.
Well, not only the musicians, as you're saying, we started with musicians because we had their artifacts and we could tell the story of the musician through their artifact. And musicians have never gotten the credit do to them and how much it means they're playing on a record that makes a record. But that's also the same for the producers and the engineers. So we love everything about music and educating people on how music's made. And producers, engineers have a big part in that.
Well, and now, Jim, you have a good knowledge of how the selection of equipment feeds into the sound of the finished product. A lot of times we think about just the microphone that Frank Sinatra may have been using, right? Or that Elvis may have been using. But it's interesting to see the equipment and how that played into the sound and the finished production of a piece of music.
Of course, the microphone is just a small part of it, although it's really important which microphone complements what instrument. But beyond that, you need to control the level somewhat so it doesn't overdrive the equipment, and you're going to need a compressor limiter for that. And sometimes you want to bring a little bit more bass or a little more treble into it, so an equalizer. And then you've got to mix it all together and blend it, and that takes equipment. And it also takes knowledge. It's, there's a lot between this ear and that ear that has nothing to do with equipment. A lot of records were made in the past, just a good microphone and a recorder.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Tell me about this room. What was the motivation for the Hall of Fame and Museum to build a radio studio?
Well, of course, it came from Jim Gilmore. He told my late husband, who was the founder of the museum, that he had this board and it would make a great exhibit to show people how the board worked and what an old board looked like. And my husband said, Joe was his name, Chambers, and he said, okay, well, I want it to work. And Jim said, well, it doesn't work. It doesn't have any guts. And Joe was like, yeah, but I want it to work. And Jim said again, but it has no guts. So Jim spent almost 3 years, I guess, putting it back together.
All during COVID.
Yeah.
Joe doesn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
No, I want it to work.
Yeah.
And then he said, and I want it to be stereo. I said,
Yeah.
Joe. But
Yeah.
you couldn't tell Joe.
Yeah. And he wanted to be period so that people could see the other parts that go with it, the speakers and all. And Jim did a great job resourcing that and getting everything to look like this board looked, but it sounds amazing.
You mentioned speakers. I meant to ask you, tell me about the speakers on the wall above it.
These speakers are they're not the speakers, but they're just like the ones that were in the original WFM.
Okay.
That was pretty much, these things were pretty much the standard. These are Electro Voice Century 1A.
Century 1A.
They were pretty much broadcast standard.
So, Linda, before we let you go, let me ask you if a radio station is interested in sending their morning crew or somebody to Nashville to broadcast out of a studio that has famous gear, and they get to walk through a famous door.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Jim Gilmore about that door in a minute. But what does a radio station need to do?
Well, contact Jim.
Oh.
And yes, we're just now getting this room going. It's just finished and ready to do podcast out of. We plan on, for our visitors, maybe spinning records sometimes and different things. There's so much we can do in here. So yeah, we'd love people interested to contact us.
Jim, I've got my station has a couple of Victrolas I'd like to bring in.
Sure, just bring them on, and we'll do the best we can. But it depends on what kind of records you have. So.
Tell me about when I visited you here 2 years ago. You've had an addition, and that is an entrance door that wasn't there before. What's special about the door?
Well, we needed a sound lock. Make sure that when there are big events going on out there, and they can have bands and everything going out there, that we isolate the sound a little bit. So the best way to do that is with an airlock, and so that's what it is. And then Linda said, "Hey, we've got a great door to put on." And I said, "What do you have?" And she said, "It's the door out of Columbia Studio B, the Quonset." Well,
why didn't the Quonset Hut still need it?
Well, they have remodeled that place and changed it over the years, and
we'd had it for a long time. In storage. Our first museum before it closed, we had it there, and it was in a room that looked like the Quonset hut. And so it had been in storage, but Joe had worked at CBS and they were remodeling. They had taken that door down and always been into preserving, whether it's instruments, gear, preserving history is what we're about. And so he was like, you know how many people walk through that door? You know, we can't let that, we got to find a use for it. So it had been in storage for a long time, and this was the perfect place to put it. It's fun.
So who's walked through that door?
Brenda Lee, Bobby Vinton, Patsy Cline. I mean, it just goes on. And
Johnny
probably
Cash.
the last one to walk through there was, you got a guess, Linda? What was the last session done in there? Remember a song called Swingin'?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, John Anderson.
John Anderson, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That was the last session in the Quonset hut as it was. John Anderson was probably one of the last people.
Wow.
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash.
You name it.
Tammy Wynette. Yeah. So it's a famous store.
Yes, yeah. You've got a display in here from Sun Records, Sam Phillips, and the recorder used to record so many famous people from Memphis.
Yeah. Well, the Reco Cut machine that we have was the first song that Elvis recorded on was on that Reco Cut machine. And that was when Sun, you could go in and pay a few dollars and, you got the record, mistakes and all, but, got to record and take something home with you. And before Elvis was Elvis, he went in to record something for his mother, and it was called My Happiness for her birthday. And it was on that machine. And we got that machine from Shelby Singleton, who had Sun at one time. But the actual record went up for auction and was sold for, I think, $350,000 that was on that machine. Wow. So, yeah, it's a great exhibit, too. Yeah.
I'm so thankful for both of you. We got a tip of the week coming up in just a minute. And guys, I got to do a commercial right now. So if you'll let me do a commercial, I'm going to do a commercial. I got to pay the bills. I got to pay Suncast. Suncast, we're going to talk about Angry Audio right now. And this is a console of a different kind at Angry Audio. So this is a modern console developed by a guy named Mike Dosh. He's down in Franklin, Tennessee, so he's right here in the area with all, Jim, you ought to go meet Mike Dosh.
You met him.
You have.
At our one of our luncheons.
That's right. He spoke at one of our luncheons. Yeah. That's right. So the Rave mixing console, this is an analog console. So this is not audio over IP. Mike Dosh knows that there are applications where you just want to plug an analog console in. Something that's heavy duty and reliable. It gives you some things like a mix minus for, a codec or a phone phone hybrid. It's got these beautiful faders for your for your speakers and your headphones. It uses the Studio Hub connectors on the back to plug things in quickly. Those are gold plated, so they actually last a long, long, long time. They're actually designed to connect better when they wiggle. How about that? And it's got avionics grade switches. It's got really super quiet mic preamps in it, and you can use those first four faders for either mic or line inputs. The Rave console, this sucker is well built. I've actually put one together. I put the top on the bottom. I thought, holy cow, this is nice. The Rave console, the Rave radio mixer from Angry Audio. You can go to angryaudio.com and read all about it. You can also order one from your favorite dealer, and that might even include Broadcasters General Store. Hey, Max Connect Wireless is another sponsor of ours, and Josh Bone has put together an amazing service that's perfect for broadcasters. Max Connect Wireless. Let's hear a little testimonial right here.
With all of the recent cybersecurity attacks against large corporations, we were looking for a product that would give us the ultimate security at our transmitter sites and as well as with our broadcast equipment. Max Connect fits the bill very well. Its greatest security feature is the fact that it gives you a single static IP address. Using this single static IP address allows us to close hundreds of open ports on our firewalls across the company and restrict access to only the Max Connect IPs. This has greatly reduced our exposure to the World Wide Web and made us much more secure moving forward. It has also given us the ability to expand as needed in a secure fashion.
Big thanks to Josh Bone at Max Connect for inventing this prioritized service and arranging for it from the major carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon, and even in Canada with Bell. So check this out. And by the way, they also have a satellite delivery network to get you IP via satellite with LTE 4G as the backup. So you can have a transmitter site in the middle of the hinterlands, and you can have great IP service with a static IP address there. Check it out from Max Connect at maxconnect.com. All right, we're wrapping up our show here. It's Kirk Harnack along with Linda and Jim, and we are at the Musicians Hall of Fame in the radio studio here. That's a pretty cool gear in it, famous gear. You can touch the same knobs that they used to mix the Grand Ole Opry with at the Ryman Auditorium back in the 1960s, and that the Waking Crew used here in Nashville in the 70s and even into the early 80s. All right, Jim, it's time for our tip of the week, and I know you've been working overtime to come up with something salient, intelligent, uplifting.
I think you want to talk to Linda for that. The only thing I can say is don't forget the past. Don't throw that stay level in the dumpster. Don't forget that there is something out there other than digital audio. Check out the past, learn about it if you need to, and go listen to it, but not on MP3. Go find some vinyl. Listen to the past.
I think it's absolutely fascinating that the materials and the tools that we had to work with in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, in through the 80s, before we got digital, that a lot of those materials turned out to actually work really well with audio. Imagine if they didn't, and digital was this enormous step up in quality. Well, that would be a little bit of a sad story. But we found ways to use materials of the past, like the things that went into vacuum tubes and selenium rectifiers and old capacitors and just all the things that we used that could actually make audio sound pretty desirable to listen.
That's exactly right. The one thing that really bothers me, and probably bothers you too, is that we have gotten to the point in our lives where compressed MP3 audio has become the standard. Kids growing up today are used to listening to stuff on their iPod. They don't know how it's really supposed to sound. And I don't know if we're going to retain that, if it's just going to go out the window. Who knows? But I would advise anybody out there to go find a really good quality piece of vinyl. Put it on a set of good headphones. Listen to it, and listen to what it really.
I'm going to say this with my tongue firmly in my cheek. Being an old disc jockey, I like how they used to put that cue burn sound at the beginning of every song.
It happens all the time because you just take the turntable back there, you push it backward,
and maybe you can even hear the Beatles say some ugly things.
Well, let me tell you. Okay. I'll give you one thing that's really funny. Or really interesting, in my opinion. Back when I was a disc jockey in high school, I used to have to play a devotional at the end of the broadcast day. We would sign off at midnight. And it was by the United Presbyterian Church.
Sure.
It was called Be Still and Know.
Yeah, I remember that.
And you had the disc, and it would start out, Be Still and Know. And I would push it backwards and cue it.
Oh, no.
And it would go, wasn't that good, Zeep? And I thought, that's funny. So I turned on the Ampex tape recorder in the control room. And I said, wasn't that good, Zeep? And I flipped the tape around and put it back, and it said, Be Still and Know. So you can guess what happened next. Well, you can find select words that you want to say to people sometimes and know how to say them backwards.
Know how to say them backwards.
Exactly. I'm really not kidding.
That's like better than Pig Latin.
Yeah.
Much better.
Oh, gosh. All right. Linda Chambers, thank you so much for being with us. Linda's a CEO and co-founder here at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum.
Yes.
All right.
And thank you for being here. And we represent all genres of music, and not just the musicians, but how the records were made. So it's a great history of music here. So we invite everyone to come out and see us, 401 Gay Street, first floor of the Municipal Auditorium, historical Municipal Auditorium. Yeah.
A lot of bands have played up there.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody except the Beatles, I think, have played up there. Yeah. Yeah. Of old bands. So, yeah, it's great.
I saw my first concert.
Did you?
It was in 1963 or 4. Anybody guess what it was? It wasn't the Beatles. It was the Animals.
Oh my goodness.
The Animals.
Yeah.
Wow. And who sang for the Animals?
Eric Burden.
And did anybody else that we know?
Oh, I'm sure. I can't remember.
I may be thinking of a different group. Who sang Valerie in the 70s?
We should both know.
Oh, we should both know. Yeah, people in the audience right now, I'm sure, are saying, "I can't think of the guy's name."
I can hear the song.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's for another show. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Tell your friends, please, about This Week in Radio Tech. Big thanks to our producer, Suncast. We made a couple mistakes during the show, so we're going to do a little bit of editing. Sorry, Suncast. I appreciate you very much. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech.